Revit is a multidisciplinary design and coordination tool. As a mechanical engineer, you will likely adjust your model as the project progresses. It could be as simple as moving ducts or components to avoid clashes, and it could be as extensive as changing the entire duct type or system to meet new project requirements. In this video, we'll explore some Revit tools that make adjusting ducts and duct systems easy. So open the file you used in the previous video or adjusting ducts and pipes in the chapter 3 exercise files folder. So at this point, launch Revit, navigate to exercise files. From the chapter 3 folder, open this file adjusting ducts and pipes, which I have here open. Then open the default 3D view. Tap the tab key once on your keyboard and select the duct layout for the supply air system in the living dining zone. You find some tools for adjusting ducts on the ribbon here. The first is routing solutions, and this can give you multiple alternatives for the duct layout if it's available. And this is a bit similar to the generate layout tool we explored in a previous video. So just like the automatic routing tool, you want to use this tool cautiously, as you will likely need to adjust the outcome in most cases. Then you have justify, and this lets you configure the eccentricity of the duct layout. By default, it's concentric, which means it's horizontally and vertically justified to the center, but you can always change to a different option from here. Then you have change type, and this lets you swap the duct layout to a different duct type, which overrides the routing preferences with a new type. So if I want to switch the duct type from what I have here currently, which is rectangular duct method elbow/tabs, I can easily swap to a different duct type entirely. Next, you have reapply type. As the name suggests, this will reapply the current duct type definition to the layout, and this is useful if you've manually made some changes after laying out the duct, or if there are some updates to the routing preferences that you want to push out to the existing layout. The next you have is the installation tools. So the first is add installation, and this lets you add installation to the selected duct. So upon clicking the button, you specify the installation type as well as the thickness, and you can also edit type and define the installation material from here. Now if you add the installation here, the adjacent two buttons will now become active, which are edit installation and remove installation. So you can use them to edit or remove the installation from the selected ducts. Then you have the lining tool. The first is add lining, and this, just like installation, lets you add lining to the selected ducts. So whereas installation is outside the duct, lining is inside. So upon clicking the button, you also specify the installation type and the installation thickness, and you can also edit type to define the installation material and even the roughness. So similar to the installation, when you add the lining, the other two buttons become active. So now you can edit or remove the lining as necessary. So just to show you what this looks like, if I go to the floor plan here, you will see the installation and lining added to the ducts. So you can see the dotted lines inside, that's the lining, and you can see the solid line outside, that is the installation. So I can still select the duct run by clicking the tab key once from here, and I'll just remove both the lining and the installation, and you see the lines will disappear. So now that we're in the ground floor plan here, when you select a duct run, you can also switch the type from the type selector. So if I want to switch this, just this duct, not the entire layout, I can select this and choose a different duct type from here. Also, you can adjust the layout of an entire duct system by moving a portion. So for example, if I want to move this entire layout, I can move just this duct. I can move the duct this way, and you see it adjusts. The other ones adjust as well. I can even move just the fitting. For example, this transition that I have here, I can just move it, and it will also move anything that's connected to it Similar to the equipment, I can select the fan coil unit that I have here and I can move it, and it will move everything attached to it. So depending on the kind of adjustment you want to make, you can do that from any part of the layout of the system. Now, when you select a duct fitting, for example, I have this elbow here. When you select it, you will see icons. So depending on the type of duct fitting or the type of layout that you have, you will see some icons like plus, minus, rotate, flip, and whatnot. For example, I have this plus icon here. So I can switch this elbow to a T and back using the plus and minus icon. So when I click on this, this becomes a T. So this is useful when you want to branch out or continue a layout after a branch, among other scenarios. So let's say, for example, I have another air terminal here and I want this duct to run there. I can change it to a T and then I simply create similar and I run another duct to continue running the layout. So if I want to undo this, I can just click on this existing T, or let's say I have a T, I want to change to an elbow, I can just click on minus. Now I can see flip. So the icons change a bit depending on the scenario and the fittings that you have in place. Now also you can modify ducts by using the standard trim tools. Let's say, for example, I have a duct, I type DT. So let's say I have this duct that I want to connect, that boy stops here, and I want to connect it to this. I can either drag it and make sure that it meets this duct and automatically to trim, or I can use the standard modified trim tool in Revit to connect both. So if I come here and I click this trim extend single element, I select this duct and I select this, and automatically they connect. Now next, during a duct run, you can also use the spacebar to inherit the size and elevation from the originating duct. So let's say you have an existing duct and you just want to create another duct that retains the properties of that existing one. You don't want to start checking the elevation and the size and whatnot. I can simply activate the duct command by typing DT. And before I draw the duct, I hold down the space bar. Then by the time I draw this out, you see that it's coming from that duct. By the time I release this and I create this, it automatically takes up the properties of the originating duct. Now lastly, you can change the system properties of a duct run by touching one of the ducts with the correct properties. So let's say, for example, I wanted to make this a supply system, currently is return. So what I can do is I can create a duct and then I make sure that it has the correct system type that I want. So if I change this to supply air, for example, you can see that system classification is supply air. I can simply draw this duct and touch it with one of the ducts here, and you see what happens. It changes the entire layout to that system. So sometimes if you don't want to start manually modifying the system type, this is a quick way you can quickly change the system classification or the type for the duct layout. So there are so many tips and tricks to modifying ducts in Revit. These are just some of the tools and features that are available in Revit for adjusting duct layout. So with practice, you quickly realize that running and modifying duct runs in Revit is the easy bit of HVAC design and modeling. So in the following video, we'll explore the tools for adjusting pipes and pipe systems.